So there are students there that don't want to use AI because they are worried about how it's going to impact their capabilities. There are students that are worried about using AI because they're worried about being accused of cheating.
Hi, I'm Jayson Manship, host of Authentic and Agentic, presented by TechPoint. Every week on this show, we break down what's happening in AI and what it means for how we work, lead, and live. Join me for a human-focused conversation that keeps you ahead of the curve. This is the Authentic and Agentic podcast on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. Hey friends, Jayson Manship here with Authentic and Agentic. This is my weekly podcast with the IBJ Media Network where we dig into the world of artificial intelligence. Every week I like to start with some news from around AI. A lot happening always. That's why we do a weekly show, because there's just so much movement in the world of AI. So today I've picked 3 stories that I think are super interesting because they kind of cross the gamut. They're all over the place. So let's start first with SpaceX. So if you haven't heard, I'm sure you probably have, SpaceX just did the largest IPO in history. So they raised more than $85 billion at their IPO, valuing the company somewhere north of $1 trillion, and post-launch trading, I heard somewhere closer to $2 trillion, which is wild, right? There are dozen-ish trillion-dollar companies in the world, and this is a brand new one that just launched that is instantly worth that amount. And so here's why I think I want to unpack this. So when you think SpaceX, you think, Elon Musk's NASA competitor, friendly. I don't know how that all works, right? In terms of like if they're pushing space forward, if they're challenging NASA, like how it all fits together. But they're shooting rockets into space. It's a real thing, right? He has publicly said that he wants to make our species interplanetary, and he wants to have humans on other planets. Cool. Sounds big, fascinating. We've all seen the sci-fi movies. I don't know if it's real or not, but it's super cool to have that vision, right? When NASA came out back in the day, I think it really motivated generations of people to think bigger. I mean, quite literally, the reason my company is called Moonshot is because I think about challenging myself, my team, ourselves collectively to kind of what's next. Like, let's go out into the next frontier. And so I applaud Elon for that. And SpaceX is more than just rockets. It's also Starlink, which is the satellite internet company. They folded that in. They merged with xAI, which is the open AI / Anthropic competitor. So this is the Grok, if you've used Grok at all, powered by xAI. X is part of this, formerly Twitter. And so all of this stuff kind of comes together under the umbrella of SpaceX. So it's kind of like a vertically integrated AI infrastructure company. So you get data from X, you get models from xAI, you get distribution through Grok, you get communication through Starlink, and arguably, if they're going to put compute power in space that Elon's been talking about, like, it is kind of vertically integrated. And so there is a lot of interest in this concept. I don't know, how far-fetched this is in terms of, where we're headed as a society, as a race, as a planet. But I think it's really interesting that the market is responding in such a way. I mean, I know a lot of people that don't like Elon Musk politically, or if what he stands for, or thinks he's creepy, or whatever reasons, right? So he's a pioneer. He's pushing the ball forward. He is moving things. He's getting us thinking about bigger. And I think that there's a lot of interest, in my point of view, in just watching all this play out. I mean, I drive a Tesla. I love it. It gets me from point A to point B where I don't have to touch a button. I push a button and it drives me from where I start to where I finish without me having to touch the steering wheel, do anything else. It is wild. It feels like living in the future. He's been talking about Optimus, the new humanoid robots that are coming out within the next couple of years. I mean, they are absolutely pushing the envelope. And so super interesting to see this SpaceX announcement. It's kind of wild to think about how all this is vertically integrated to get us to more AI, really, is what it is. It's an AI empire build, I think. On the second story I want to talk about is Anthropic. And this is wild because I don't know if you saw this, but the U.S. government asked Anthropic this last week to shut off access to its newest high-end models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5. So specifically for foreign nationals, right? They didn't tell them to shut it off. They said, shut it off for foreign nationals. This is too powerful. We don't want people outside of the US to have access to this. If you remember correctly, the Mythos model, frontier model, was delayed coming out by Anthropic because they found, as they were preparing to push it out, that it was too powerful, that it could be used to crack passwords, it could be used for nefarious purposes. And so they came back and said, hey, we really spent some engineering time tweaking this and nerfing this a little bit so that it's still the most powerful model on the planet, but not to be abused. So the U.S. government basically said, hold on, we think it's still too powerful. And they, wrote up a reason and sent it to Anthropic, and Anthropic complied. I mean, broadly, I would say they pushed back really hard. Their press release, or their release they put up on their website on Friday, I think it was, the 12th, was pretty pointed, right? They're basically making the case that if that they believe that there is a potential very narrow jailbreak opportunity, which in techie, nerdy cybersecurity terms is like a crack in the foundation, right? A way to get in. And it's pretty narrow and it doesn't have a lot of exposure, so it can't really go rogue and cause all kinds of major problems. But sure, there are some insecurities that they're patching and working on. So they claim that what the government is suggesting is just not true. And that, they're going to work with the government and do the thing that they feel like they need to do, but also like push back. And so in that, what they're now saying is, we are questioning whether or not the government should be able to restrict this sort of a thing. So let's think about this for a second. We used to restrict chips. So the federal government would say, hey, our chip making capabilities in the US are too good. And so we're not going to ship these chips to China or other places. Physical hardware, pretty easy to easy is the wrong term. Easier, probably, to create restriction and export and those sorts of things. Now we're talking about frontier models. Now we're talking about information. And it feels like the government's stepping in and saying, hey, this is a US only asset, dear company. And they're wanting to step in and actually restrict these models. So when does an AI model become a national security asset instead of a commercial product? How does the government decide who gets control? And this is the question we've been asking since I started this podcast. Who's in charge? How does this work? Who gets to say if it's okay or not okay? Ultimate power ultimately corrupts. As these AI companies are racing towards trillion-dollar IPOs, whether it be the President of the United States, the US Congress, the European Union, NATO, the CEO of a company, the board of directors of a company, like ultimate power ultimately corrupts. And so who gets to decide what's okay, what's not okay, and who has access to this? We are moving to the point, folks, of no return in some ways. Like the model is now at a point where the developers have said, hold on, this is too powerful. Let's tweak it. Let's nerf it. Let's make it simpler. Then they roll it out and the government says, hold on, this is too powerful. Guys, we're like a few years into really building these AI models. What happens over the next 5-10 years? Who's in charge? How does this work? This is a big one. This is a big, big, big one. And I think it's going to be wild to watch it play out. For the third story this week, I want to pivot. This is more down to earth in your neighborhood. And this is, I think, another existential conversation, another conversation we have to have that doesn't feel like trying to solve all the world's problems, but it is a micro conversation that impacts all of us in some ways. And so I'm going to use an example. I was reading a story this week about how at the National Conference of Franchisees or whatever it is, the McDonald Corporation, the Golden Arches, they announced that they are now testing a Google-powered AI drive-thru system. They're calling it Arch IQ or Archie, depending on who you talk to. And you drive up to the window, you place your order, and 90% of the orders are now being handled without a human. It's an AI bot that's listening and talking back to you, and it's very conversational, and it tries to understand what you meant when you said light ice or no pickles, or can you take two beef patties or no beef patties, and all that sort of stuff, right? And so it's It is an AI model listening as you're talking, and it's trying to reduce the labor costs and time spent in taking the order specifically, right? But I want to talk about this for a second. So cool. That's where AI is heading. AI is making redundant tasks faster, easier, and better. But I want to remind us of the conversation we have all the time. To what end? What is the goal here? Is it that labor costs are a huge chunk of the cost of fast food? And so by doing this, we can bring back the 99-cent menu to lower costs to give cheaper food options to people? Maybe. I think more likely, though, the companies that are investing and moving forward are thinking about improving their margins, reducing their labor costs, speed, consistency, upsell, staffing flexibility. Like there's a lot of variables, I think, there, folks, that if I'm a business owner, that's what I'm thinking about, right? And I don't believe the first movers are just trying to save money. I think they are trying to build a restaurant model where some of the problems they're facing, think about yourself. I don't own a franchise. I do own a retail store with laborers, right? With people running retail. And one of the things you're thinking about are, people calling in sick, training inconsistencies, like bottlenecks, variables that you couldn't plan for, right? I mean, some of this stuff, especially on the ordering side of the equation, kind of makes sense to think about using AI. But what does it do for entry-level jobs? I mean, Jeremy, who my business partner at Nameless Catering, he started at McDonald's. My brother-in-law, Eric, started at McDonald's. These are first-time jobs for a lot of people who are learning how to life, who are learning how to grow in their career. And I have friends that have been at McDonald's for 20 plus years and have climbed the ladder and have built something great of their life and their career, right? I mean, I'm just curious to know what happens to the labor markets, what happens to us as consumers. Will there be backlash? Right now, I'm seeing in the board game space at Gen Con coming up in August, if your booth has AI-generated art in it, there is a contingency of people in the Facebook groups that are saying, I will not visit your booth and I will never buy something from you. Because they're taking a political stand, a pointed stand that they believe in, right? And I totally support that they don't want to support someone who's not using real artists. Totally reasonable, right? Are people going to stop shopping at places or stop going to places like McDonald's because they got rid of their human labor? I don't know. I mean, we're seeing the kiosk trend happen, the QR code trend happen. Like the world is moving less human and more digital and more automation. And I think this is just a perfect example of how this works. It's wild. And if you haven't ever experienced this, I don't know enough about how like all the franchise systems work and everything rolls out. I think there's some personal choice that the franchisees can make. I don't really know. But if you're in Plainfield, Indiana on US 40, there's a Taco Bell there near my Plainfield store for Moonshot. And they have had for a while this same type of ordering system. And the first time I went through it, that's right, Taco Bell's delicious. I was like, what is happening right now? And I'm an AI person, right? And it got most of my order right. I pushed some buttons just to see how far it would mess up. And, can I get extra cheese on that? Can I do this? Can you take that out? And overall, it did pretty good. And then it just elevates you to an actual person who walks into the conversation with full context of all the stuff I've been going back and forth with the bot on. So anyway, super fascinating. We'll see how the world goes. I just wanted to prompt this. I think this is an important thing for us to just be paying attention to as we interact in the outside world, is that this isn't just about white collar writing tasks. Just in this little brief news segment, we've been talking about rockets, national security, fast food, customer service, the physical world, compute in space. It's wild. It's just wild. I say this a lot. It's not just the companies that are using the flashiest, coolest, neatest thing. I think the companies that use AI to redesign their operating model underneath their business are probably the ones that are going to win. And so on that note, I talked to a lot of people here in Indiana through my partnership with TechPoint and just dealing with leaders at companies. How do we implement AI? How do we use it? What do we do with it? And one of the things that we're seeing is that I mean, there is a need for people to step into a company with AI experience. And because it really hasn't been around for so long, like everyone's learning on the fly in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I really want to kind of lean into as this show continues to evolve is to talk about the path to go from young kid in school to first job, right? What does that look like? And so one of the things I really want to dig into is how universities are thinking about this thing. And so this week's episode, we're going to do a quick commercial break, but this week's episode is with two new friends from Indiana University, Brian Williams and Ann Leftwich. And I sit down with them in a Zoom conversation to talk about how they have rolled out what they're calling Gen AI 101 at IU. This is a AI training curriculum, digital training curriculum that helps people level up in AI quickly. And they've rolled it out to 120,000 people, which is wild to me, across their campuses. And we have a long chat about how it's going, what they've learned, what mistakes have they made, what are they finding, who's on board, who's off board, how does this impact the education system, what does it look like coming into a university? And so I think you're going to really have an interesting perspective on this conversation. Like, it is a fun chat about how universities like IU, with the scale and scope of 120,000 plus customers, constituents, employees, whatever term, right? They're serving a large base of humans. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are trying to say, like, how do I roll this out to my company? How do I make AI a thing in my company? Well, these are the folks kind of leading the charge at a very large higher ed level. So let's go to our sponsors, and then we'll come back with our conversation with Ann and Brian from IU. I think you're going to love it. AI isn't just changing jobs, it's changing who gets hired. TechPoint's new brief, AI amplifies the need to address the experience gap, shows how AI is changing entry-level jobs, and how employers can take advantage of this moment. Download the brief and find out ways to get involved at techpoint.org/AI gap. AI is transforming every industry, and Indiana Wesleyan University is preparing professionals to lead that change. IU offers a Master of Science in AI and Data Analytics, a graduate certificate in AI Business Innovation, and an Applied AI Analytics concentration, all designed for working adults. Flexible, online, Christ-centered, and grounded in biblical ethics. Discover how IU can help you find the way forward. Visit indwes.edu. Brian, Ann, thank you guys so much for joining me today on the Authentic and Agentic podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to dig in here. So we're doing Zoom. I don't do a lot of Zoom calls, but I love the fact that you guys made time for this. And so you're from IU. I met Ann at the Mira Awards because you won a Mira Award for the work that you've done at IU, and specifically around rolling out, I think it was ChatGPT, to a very large audience inside. I mean, like literally faculty, students, et cetera, admin, users. But you're doing a lot more than just that. So let's start there. And maybe talk to me about what happened at the Mira Awards and what the award was for, and kind of what that is, and then we'll get into some of the other specifics on the work you guys are doing now and what you've learned along the way.
Sure. Yeah, it was really focused on how we're approaching AI adoption and innovation at IU, and how do we do that across a large scale organization with so many different moving pieces, with so many different kind of perspectives in mind. And so how do you provide the tools that are necessary, the training that's necessary, the support, the guidance, the governance, all of the ethical concerns, thinking about environmental concerns. There is so much wrapped up into AI adoption and diffusion. And how do we get everybody to a point where we're using it for amplification of our human skills and what we do as humans, and automating things that allow us to have more time to dedicate to the important human relationship pieces. I'm sure everyone out there has things that they would rather take off of their plate, right? That wouldn't it be great if AI, robot, et cetera, could do this, whether it's laundry or making meals for my children. But no, in all seriousness, like thinking about what are the ways in which we're really supporting the mission of our organization, which for our intent and purposes are really trying to advance research, teaching, and service at IU.
Well, I want to start with the scale of rolling this out to you said a large user base, right? I mean, I think that's an underestimate. How many total people are we talking about here?
We have over 110,000 students across all of our campuses. And then I think 9,000 faculty and maybe more staff as well. So it is a large number that we're trying to target, and lots of different disciplines and business considerations to have.
Oh, for sure. You're dealing with students that are learning life in real time. You're dealing with professors that have done it their way for, in some cases, 30 or 40 years. Yeah. You're dealing with administration. I mean, what I witnessed in higher ed for decades was it wasn't exactly a fast-moving object, right? I mean, it adapts to the world, right? And it's always thinking about how do we train our students better. I think that's awesome. But I have seen higher ed move faster than I've ever seen it before with this AI stuff happening. And
I would 100% agree with that. I think higher education, we tend to be critical thinkers, right? Really trying to analyze what is the best approach, what are the unintended consequences that we may not have thought about, to try and move all of those pieces forward. And because we are oftentimes, at least I'll speak from my own mindset of like professors being in our own heads of like thinking about what are the possibilities, how can we do this better, what does this look like, what are the theoretical constructs that we're learning from or adding to it, to come up with the best potential option, that sometimes the action piece doesn't always push as fast. Now, that's not necessarily the case, I would say, in Brian's, in the Kelley School of Business with Brian. But I think that you can look at other instances that we've also had. A lot of it came from our administration, specifically, actually from our president, which I think is not always the case when you're looking at whatever the strategic priorities of the president might be. This has been a strategic priority for our president to ensure that we are being innovative, that we are using the best tools, that we have people that are capable and ready to think in innovative ways. How do we kind of shake ourselves up and make sure that we're providing our students, our researchers, and the state with the best possible resources and skill sets they possibly could have? So she came in and actually charged us with trying to find what are the ways that we can design something that can uplift everybody with AI skills. And then she found Brian that was able to make all of this happen with a Gen AI 101 course that has just received a ton of really positive reception.
All right. Let's bring the wizard into the conversation. Brian, talk to me about Gen AI 101. And I am going to double click a little bit more in this conversation around, Pam Whitten's vision and pushing, because I heard that from the Lilly executives also, that when David Ricks said, hey, we're going to do this, like top-down leadership makes all the difference in the world because it gets alignment and buy-in and everyone knows it's a priority. But let's talk about, Brian, what you brought to the table, what this is. If I'm an everyday average person, I don't know anything about this. I don't know what sets IU apart, why it's different, what you've done. Walk us through it.
Yeah, so Gen AI 101 is about a 3-hour course. It takes someone from knowing nothing about AI to building their own custom AI assistants for their workflow at the end. We wanted to make it really practical and really, I would say, dare say, entertaining. So the videos are all less than 10 minutes. Most are around 6 minutes, and each one has a really practical lesson. So there's no math involved, and it's not very conceptual at all. It's instead like, here's how you actually get creative ideas out of AI, and here's 3 prompts to do so, or here's how you get AI to push back on your ideas, or here's a prompting framework. Here's some surprising ways AI works, right? Like AI is not human, but it's trained on human generated data, and that leads to a lot of insights from psychology that you can use when using AI to get much better output on it. And so it's pretty unique in that sense of being, essentially 36 to 10 minute videos that are almost shot in like a YouTube style, like a trying to be entertaining format. And then we also we call it a co-teacher. We have a CGI AI called Crimson, who's in many of the videos, to try to like kind of personify AI. So oftentimes Crimson is helpful. Sometimes Crimson makes mistakes. Oftentimes Crimson is comedic relief, but trying to hit that value of like, you can see AI is helpful, but makes mistakes, and also be entertained along the way.
I love that. And so when the president says, hey, we're going to lean in on this, we need to solve it, you guys are tasked with, and I guess maybe help me, Brian, understand roles and responsibilities a little bit. So I know in an institution that's rolling this out to 120,000 people, I assume it's not you two people doing all of it. There's probably a team or departments or groups or various other places you have to connect with. So give me a little bit of an understanding of that, because one of the questions I get a lot is, how do we actually implement this, right? And most people listening to this aren't trying to implement to 120,000, but many people listening to this are trying to implement to 1,000, right? Or 500 employees or staff members of all different degrees of competency and discipline and interest, right? And so give me a high-level overview of like how you two fit together and where it fits into the broader organization as a starting point.
Yeah, so Ann and I are kind of the co-teachers and co-developers of the class itself. So the curriculum and stuff like that we developed together. I'm the teacher in most of the videos. Ann is the teacher in some of the videos as well. And then around that, we have a whole team. So Kelly has something called the Jellison TV Studios. So we film things in there. They edit their video, edit the graphics in. They also animated the CGI AI. From there, we're able to work with a bunch of people at the university in different ways in terms of setting up the Canvas course, making things are accessible. We had a few technical experts to make sure we're not doing things wrong, right? Because you want to simplify and like you can't get everything perfect, but to make sure you're not misleading. So there was like a whole team of people involved, like helping in many, many ways throughout the whole process.
Okay, so that's the Gen AI 101 piece. How do we roll that out, right? And so I saw that it's part of students can get to it. So let's start there. I also know that you guys have even rolled this out beyond students, even to, I think, the general public at this point. So start by talking about the student and administration rollout and how something like that happens. And then I want to talk a little bit about adoption and what you've learned along the way too.
Yeah, Ann, do you want to lead here? You really led that initiative.
Sure. Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about the student part of it and also what we've learned. I'm not going to call them failures because every opportunity, great opportunity to just build on whatever that success is. So each new student is a success story to me. So we started out we auto enrolled every single one of our students. So that was over 90,000 students that were enrolled last year, starting the fall semester, across all of our campuses, including IU Online. And then we also allowed faculty and staff to elect to enroll in it as well. So we had, I think, over 4,000 faculty and staff enroll in the course too. So there has been a lot of interest from the individuals that make it basically past the first video and complete the first module. There is like great correlation to them finishing the course. And so they didn't get sick of us after the first, module or first activity. They see a lot of value in it and they continue to move forward. We also tried to do some student competitions because it was not mandated for the students to complete it, right? It just appeared in their Canvas and many people, or Brian got so many of these emails of what is this? What this course is just appearing. What is this course? Do I have to complete it? So a lot of replies back to say you're not required to complete it is really great. And we did have students kind of poke around in it as well to look at some of the videos and utilize some of the prompts. And we're still doing a more thorough analysis on exactly what came of it and what were some of the learning moments. We also had student competitions for some of their organizations, and that didn't take off as much as we had hoped. So we didn't get a huge student completion rate from that. However, on the faculty and staff side, again, coming down from our president. So our president had her entire cabinet take the course. So every single VP at IU had taken this course. And then all of those VPs have asked their staff and area to complete the course as well. So actually, a large portion of our upper level administration has taken AI, is committed to AI, is moving forward. We had, I will say, so the president's cabinet had the largest completion rate with, I think, like 90 something percent. And then UITS, which is the organization that I sit in, it's our technology space. We had the second largest completion rate, which we have a lot of employees. So we were, I think 67% of all of our employees completed that Gen AI 101, which is really fantastic. And then it kind of moves a little bit down from there, depending on organizations and their structure. So that has been very successful because now we have all of these VPs asking, well, how can I use AI in my area, right? So for example, JT Forbes and Foundations is doing a lot of really great work on really looking at how do we make sure that we're talking to a donor about exactly what they're interested in or like what they've done before. And so utilizing AI in order to help with that, or looking at our marketing and communications of what are some different ways that we could take the tone and the language of some of the different messages that we put forward and have maybe some drafts that we start to distribute and apply there. It's gone across all different areas, and we're continuing to look at, for example, advising in our student success areas of how do we make it easier for our advisors to get all of the information about students, because our data systems are so placed all over the place. So how might we be able to use AI in order to give the advisor kind of a picture of what the student is going through? And then you're better off, like, again, you're focusing on the human parts of it. You're not focusing on all of the technical things and going to try and find things and check off boxes. That's nothing that anyone enjoys doing. And even when we're talking about our faculty merit reviews, where we're documenting, here's how many courses I've taught, here's how many articles I've published, here's how many service activities that I've been involved in. We're even looking at how do we make AI be able to help summarize that better for us. So it's not this laborious processes of me saying, here are all the great things that I did, and I want to make sure I put it in all the right boxes and I get all the correct credit, that AI can do that thing for you. And then you can go back and check, right? So by having this, the strengths of this approach have been incredible in my lens from the leadership perspective, where we're looking very strategically at ways that we can apply it across the university to save time, not to cut jobs, right? To upskill people and be able to focus more on the human elements and dedicate human time to what's necessary.
I want to lean into that a little bit if I can. Yes, so, one of the things I heard, and you're mimicking what I heard from Eli Lilly, who has a similar hundreds of thousands of employees, right, when they started doing AI. And it starts with that top-down leadership. And so I love that you have the cabinet members and the like upper level folks actually do something with it. Because I talk to a lot of CEOs who are like, well, we don't need to hire a CFO. Let's just AI-ify it. Right. And I'm like, well, that's not how that works. You don't just like push a button. Right. And that's a common thing. Like I had a guy say like, we're all in on AI. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, we're just going to get all of our employees ChatGPT. And I'm like, well, that's great. But if they don't know how to use it and there's no strategy, like all you're doing is probably creating Pandora's box where you're going to have bigger problems you don't know about. Right. And so getting what Lilly did, which was cool, similar to yours, they didn't have this class that you guys have, right? But they got their executive partners to actually partner with somebody downstream and build something with AI, right? So an executive person was doing the same thing. And so I think if you're listening to this podcast as a leader in a company, that's how you have to be thinking about adoption internally. It's not just like a directive from on high, you all go figure it out. But like it requires a core understanding of what that even means.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a really neat thing to see. And so let's talk a little bit about, I'm curious to hear how adoption works at the student level, right? Because here's what I witnessed firsthand. I talked to a lot of kids that were through TechPoint, who's actively pushing, entry-level jobs and those sorts of things, right? That's a big part of what they're trying to do. I firmly believe it's like the best time ever to be a 22-year-old in the world, the history of the world, right? Because you have an Iron Man suit in your pocket if you put it on, and you can do anything. But I also have heard from a lot of high schoolers and others that like AI is cringe, right? That's a common thing I hear because, I don't know if that's a trend or that's just like pop culture reference. I don't know, right? But I imagine a lot of kids are just like, I don't want anything to do with this. And I imagine other kids are trying to abuse it to cheat on term papers and everything else they can do. And so, oh boy, how do you deal with that?
So there's this really interesting perspective. I think a lot of adults especially are looking at students and saying, well, students adopt technology. They love to use technology. So all of them are 100% for AI. And I think that is not the case. Just like anything, if you don't fully understand it and put it in a larger context, I think there are great opportunities to abuse the system and potentially impact your cognitive capabilities, right? Especially if you haven't perfected something. So for me, using it to help design educational tools, I have a PhD in education, right? It's not changing the way in which I think or interact with about AI. It is just amplifying and allowing me to do things faster. And then for me to be able to look at what did it actually suggest? No, I wanted to do these different things. So me using AI is much different than, for example, my kiddos using AI to help them with a paper, right? If they don't understand the constructs or some of the basic ideas, using AI could be damaging to them and what they're able to accomplish. There are also students there are students there that don't want to use AI because they are worried about how it's going to impact their capabilities. There are students that are worried about using AI because they're worried about being accused of cheating, right? We actually did a focus group with students and found that the majority of our students, and these are fantastic students that were part of this focus group, are including extra spaces, misspelling words, dumbing down their word choices just because they didn't want to be flagged as AI writing. So we're actually taking content and making it far worse, right, for our students. There are some that express environmental concerns. I think that in most of those cases, I would say that the folks that are expressing those have read an article or two and have not done the diligent research on what it actually means or considered it again in a broader context of, yes, there may be, utilizing heavy amounts of water, but it's also finding cures for breast cancer, right? So there are different things that we have to kind of weigh and make considerations. And sometimes, especially with students, they haven't done or let's be honest, sometimes adults too, like we haven't done our due diligence to really look at what that actually means.
Automobiles weren't great for the natural resources either, right? And they seem to be impactful to our life and economy and standard of living. And so those are the conversations we have to have. It's interesting you talk about the adoption and the interest and what they're... So I went to Ball State, and my freshman year was when Facebook came out, and you had to have a .edu email address, right? And so I watched that thing take off like wildfire. But it was mostly because it was a social tool, right? It was about finding friends and getting in groups and doing things like that. And it was all about who knows who. And, it was very much like just a social thing. It wasn't a productivity booster. It wasn't something that, makes my schoolwork easier or whatever. And so hearing some of those fears and concerns from students is super interesting because they're trying to find themselves in college a lot of ways. And it's not just professionally, right? It's also socially and all the things that you get in a college environment. I'll share this quick anecdote. I was interviewing the folks from the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good at Notre Dame. So they are a group studying AI ethics, right? And with a Christian conservative worldview, right? Like a Catholic worldview. And what they found is that they were interviewing some folks in Silicon Valley, and the folks there told them, hey, when we were building Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, we wouldn't let our kids use those tools because we knew they were dopamine hits and long-term toxic and brain rot and all the things that come with it. But when they talked to the people building Anthropic and OpenAI and Grok, they're encouraging their kids at the youngest ages to use these tools because they see it as a productivity booster. And if my kid levels up earlier in life, then they can get into the best schools in the country and do all the things that go with it. And so I think it's a super interesting comparison in some ways, sometimes correlation, sometimes comparison. But when you think about something, adoption spreading, and I think a college campus is a good way to think about that because you have a captured audience in some ways, right? Interactive people and all the different classes and interchanging and all that. I mean, like, I'm super fascinated by adoption of AI on a college campus.
Yeah, just to add to something you said, something Ann said, one of the most interesting answers I've ever heard to the AI ethics question, in Gen AI 101, I interviewed Pete Yonkman, who's the CEO of Cook Medical, and he said that for his company, for Cook, it would be unethical to not use AI because they can directly trace like life-saving developments they've made that were only possible from using AI. And like that was such a good answer that I think is really helpful for students and helpful for me to hear because there are some downsides, but also there are a lot of upsides that don't get talked about a lot, right? And some of the downsides, like they're there, but they also can be put in context, right? Like, yes, it uses energy the same amount as watching 8 seconds of Netflix, right? Like there's these different things and different frameworks to really think about it that I think really help when you put it in context. Like not to be too much of a cheerleader, but also not to be too much of a doomer either. Like this, it's a tool, has pros, it has cons, and you can kind of adjust for yourself where you want to land in there.
The one struggle I have with that, and I agree with you, I think all that's accurate, but I believe that it's moving the world so quickly in ways we've never seen before. I tell people on the podcast all the time, you either get on the train or you get hit by the train. There's no in between, right? You don't kind of maybe sort of dip your toe in it later because it is such an Iron Man suit that if you use it and are building with it, I can run multiple companies from a dashboard by vibe coding this, that, and the other and connecting all these dots in ways that weren't even possible. I would have had to have hundreds of thousands of annual dollars in staff and salaries to do this stuff that I can do by myself from my phone now. And so when you think about that, like those that are choosing to opt out, those that are saying, I don't want to be a part of this, I think in the near future are going to get left behind. And I think that's a challenge that you guys probably wear every day. How do we enable? How do we encourage? But it's also still a personal choice. Like people get to decide how far to go with it, right?
Yeah. One thing we've done in the business school in Kelly is going forward, because I agree with you, right? Going forward, we're going to actually have 2 required AI classes for all the incoming freshmen in Kelly, one in the fall and then one in the spring. And it's that idea, like part of these courses is the idea to make things fair, because coming in, some freshmen are from high schools where AI is banned. Some freshmen are from high schools really embracing it, right? And so we want everyone to have a level set of like, here's a fair set for the rest of your college career, rest of your interviews, things like that to be able to do, and also to try to keep them up to date. Because there's a professor, Brad Wheeler at IU, the former CIO, work with him closely at Kelly. He has this phrase that 90 days is one AI year. Right, so AI just moves so fast. So if you're not keeping up, it's really unfortunate that you will be left behind, right? And like it's a tired phrase now, but it really is useful. Like AI won't replace you, but someone who knows AI will, right? And so if you don't have those skills, like it's going to be harder to get a job. And just to add one more thing to that, one thing that I've seen is the group of people I've seen the biggest divergence in their self-assessed AI skills and actual AI skills is students. Because if you ask students, like, do you know AI well? So many of them will say yes, like I'm an AI expert. And you'll ask, what do you do? And essentially they're using it like a search engine. Or let's be frank, they're copy pasting an assignment, putting it in ChatGPT, taking the answer, right? And they think they're really advanced if they say write like a human at the end, right? That's like, and so there's just like this huge leap between using it that, I mean, you know more than anyone, right? Huge leap using it for that, like using it in an actual business workflow or using it in ways to get actual creative ideas. So part of the idea with requiring those classes is to help people realize that too. Hey, there's much more to it than just a search engine and things like that.
Everybody's talking about AI, but very few are actually executing. If your team is still experimenting with Copilot, you're already behind. Axia Technology Partners turns Microsoft AI into real business outcomes and fast. Not prompts, not pilots. This is production-grade AI embedded into your workflows. As a Microsoft certified AI solutions provider, Axia TP delivers Microsoft E7, the full stack of security, identity, and AI, implemented, governed, and scaled. While others are testing ideas, Axia TP's clients are reducing costs, automating operations, and moving faster than their competitors. This isn't about trying AI, it's about operationalizing it, and now. If you're serious about results, not experiments, visit Axia Technology Partners and start executing. Visit www.axiatp.com. That's AXIATP.com to learn more.
And one of the ways that we're trying to approach it at IU is to think about it almost in two different camps of we're here to like help you think about AI literacy and embed those in discipline-specific ways, build these capacities. But then there's also this notion of these durable human skills, right, that exist outside of the realm of AI. So as we're talking to a lot of professors or people that might feel super anxious about AI, we're coming in and saying, look, we're not here telling you have to require AI in your class, right? We're not here telling you that you have to teach AI to your students or use it yourself. However, what we are telling you is we need to prepare students for an AI-enabled world. And that looks different than what it has looked like for the past 100, 200 years, right? We have to think differently. And there is also a really great interaction between Socrates and Plato, where they were talking about how, what is going to happen with the human mind once we start writing things down? We are not going to be able to orate. We're not going to be able to engage in discussions. So yes, and we have an ability to do these higher level elements of thinking and go beyond that with than just having to memorize things, right? So the technology changes things, but it also changes what you're able to accomplish. And we need to adapt to that as a human society of like when it can do all of these additional, open up these additional possibilities.
Yeah, the conversation I had with the folks at Notre Dame, they talked about using your wet brain, right? That was just kind of the internal monologue they talked about there. But I was at a panel the other day, a couple weeks ago, with Mitch Daniels, who's back as an interim as the president of Purdue. I know that's probably like illegal language in this conversation with you guys, but he was talking about, or they were talking about how higher ed is in some ways becoming like a fitness center for your brain. Right. I mean, like keeping your brain active and keeping us thinking about, because I mean, when you think about a fitness center, I mean, if my job is to just lift as much weight as possible, like I should just take a forklift. But if my job is to actually build the muscles, then I should go lift the weights. Right. And I think that's the part that I'm encouraged about for higher ed. Right. As long as we're thinking about it that way and adapting that way, because we need that. Like it's so easy, and it's going to get easier to outsource agency, that if we don't care, you can just offload everything. You don't have to do anything, right? And that's I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I am very fearful that if we don't raise them correctly and don't give them the opportunities to challenge themselves, they will choose the path of least resistance.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to purpose too, right? So as we are designing all of our assignments and we're saying, well, the students are all cheating on this. All they're doing is they're taking this article I've asked them to read and summarize and copying and pasting and then getting a summary. And so then the question becomes, well, why are you asking them to read the article? Like, what are we trying to get out of the article? Is it that you want them to understand some of these different perspectives? Could you get them to use AI to interrogate the article, like have a conversation back and forth with the author of the article and say, like, what's the viewpoint? What's the lens? And then when you come face to face in your human discussion group, then you have something to say and contribute, as opposed to, yes, that's what the article said, or yes, that's what I interpret this article to mean, right? So I think really trying to figure out, is the task meaningful? Like, is it meaningful to ask faculty to document, here are all the things that I did over this year? Or can I just ask AI to take that from my CV that I've already written all this stuff up with and drop it into it? Like, so what is the meaningfulness of the task? If the task isn't meaningful to the human, like advancing their knowledge or thinking about things differently or reflecting on something, then I question the task.
All right,
whether it needs to be done by a human.
I'm going to push hard here because old dog, new tricks, right? So if I'm a tenured faculty member that's been here for a long time, and this newfangled thing comes in that changes everything about how I do things, or my students do things, or maybe the university is thinking about things.
Yes.
I mean, I loved the context Anne you shared about like, how are we preparing our students to enter the workforce and enter the job market, right? Because you're really thinking about it through the lens of, it's not just making them read a book, it's making them, why? Why are we reading this book? And those are the questions we should be having, right? But I imagine adoption at some parts of the university, maybe department specific or potentially like path into tenure specific, or I mean, I'm not trying to like stereotype or like get too, but I mean, I have found, for example, that software developers look at AI a lot different than artists generally, right? Because they have a different perspective and a different worldview. And so I just have to imagine that that's a bit of an uphill challenge trying to get certain faculty groups or members to appreciate the value here. And so how does a university combat that or deal with that or empower them, right, without voluntolding them they have to do it?
Yeah, well, and so I'll let Brian talk about what they're doing with Kelly, because the Kelly School of Business has really done a phenomenal job at getting more and more of their faculty to move forward. And there are some instances where AI has really thrown a wrench in their discipline. So thinking about music, for example. And so within music, there are some really interesting things you can do where, for example, if I'm stuck at a bridge and I'm composing music and maybe I want a couple of different ideas, I could iterate with AI and ask for it and then kind of, pick the best one and move along. But then what does that do to the music industry? What does that do to like who we are as musicians? And it may be that as a field, that's something that they need to kind of grapple with and say, look, we're not going to accept these kind of things, or these things are not appropriate for these reasons, right? If we do this, then new ideas, new music, it really can't be brought up. Although again, playing devil's advocate, I might say, well, it might be a way for you to introduce like and cross-contaminate different types of music that produces something really amazing, or it could be completely horrible because, it's not able to detect the patterns that are going to be the most pleasing to human ears.
I was just talking to a guy last week that's a musician, lifelong musician, and he's a writer, he's a creative. And his perspective on music was very different because he can never sing it like he hears it in his head, right? And so he's using it to actually bring to life what he's creating. And that was like, whoa, never saw that coming.
Yes. So I think there are these opportunities, right? And I think that in order to get to that, it has to be people who are in the discipline that can kind of talk about it, but then also know what's possible. And sometimes you don't know what's possible until you almost like ask the AI, right? To say, what are some different ways that I can do this? So that's been one of the ways that I have approached this, is worked with deans or department chairs and say, let's upload your programs of study, for example, and let's talk about what are the jobs that students usually get from these, and how are the ways in which they're using AI, and then how do we incorporate AI back into these particular areas. So usually the workshopping of it and showing them, first of all, that most of us have gone into becoming a professor in this field because you deeply care about your discipline, right? Like nobody goes on and gets a PhD if they aren't passionate about that particular area. So whatever you can do to connect to that discipline, whether it's, let me show you what this can do for, so mine is, I'm a professor in the School of Education. How can this really allow you to make personalized learning for your students? Which means when you go into a fifth grade classroom, if you have two students that are reading at a second grade level, you can just press a button and then it allows them to go along, get the content still, but be at a second grade level. Let's see that you have another student that is like exceptional and wants to investigate dinosaurs within this context, but you designed this particular assignment for something different. The student, like, it's very easy to quickly personalize and be able to do that. So now you're meeting a wider range of your students, and you're still interacting. There's still the human element. Or it could also be from taking it from the advantage of, again, these laborious tasks that I don't want to do. I don't want to sit there and have to analyze all the time. Where are my students at? Like, what level of reading are they at? And how could I design personalized assessments? Usually I'm going online and trying to use teacher pay teachers or different resources. So I can do all of these things with the click of a button that allow me to focus on the things that I care deeply about in my discipline. For physics, it allows you to run wild and crazy simulations on different data that can be made up. When we're talking about English, and my colleague, Justin Hodgson, he's a professor in the English department here in Bloomington. He talks about, I want to help you become a better writer. I'm not helping you write a better paper, right? So like, how do I help scaffold you to become a better writer, and some of that engagement with AI? So a lot of these things, it's more about allowing people to see what the potential is for AI to accelerate either their discipline, their research, their teaching, or to just remove some of these laborious processes off of their plate, the administrative tasks, so that they can focus on the things that they love doing.
I love
it's
that.
all about finding an angle.
And Brian, I imagine that it's a lot easier sell in the world of business because we're measuring KPIs and we're measuring, those sorts of things. And so it seems logical to me. Like, I've had the most personal success and impact when applying AI to the business world. I mean, I assume faculty members, there's for sure going to, like anywhere else, right? They're going to be, everyone's got their own reasons and, history and everything else that matters to them, right? But it feels more logical in the business world to apply it because you can start to increase productivity, reduce cost, do all the things that come with it. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And also, like, we're just naturally we're very career focused right from day one. And we're hearing from employers, like every single one, your students have to know these things or we're not going to hire them.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really been drilled into us. So our dean, Pat Hopkins, actually hosted like basically a whole day long workshop where faculty came and tried to like upskill their courses in AI. Like, how do we think about from first principles? What does it look like for your assignments to build cognitive abilities and not be able to be done by AI? And then also like add that human element, right? And so we had over 120 faculty show up, right, voluntarily for 8 hours from all the different areas with that sole intent. I was like, how do we adopt what we're doing for the AI age, knowing that we're going to have to do it again probably next semester, right? As new skills come out and new agent things come out. So definitely an easier sell in the business school, which makes sense in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I went to the Education Power Breakfast that the IBJ put on a few weeks ago. And I talked to a local leader, Amon Brar, and he was talking about how he believes that AI may not actually make educators' lives easier, right? There are moments, like Anne was describing, where you can personalize. But here's what I know in the business world. Once I learned these tools and learned how I could build with these tools, I've personally, over the last probably 60 days, been more stressed out than I've been in years and years because I have so many spinning plates, so many things that I'm maintaining and building and tweaking and optimizing, that just because you have this fancy tool that can help that, those two students go from a second grade reading level to a fifth grade, now you have to manage that and build that, right? And so like, I do think it's going to be a pretty interesting kind of rollout / adoption model, right? And everyone's going to do it a little differently. You said something about students. I teach a lot of classes, just open business classes. And I've never seen anything in my professional career where people have such disparate perspectives of what they actually know and what they don't know. They'll be like, I'm an expert. And to your point, they'll be like, I just ChatGPT. And then you'll talk to some guy who's like, I'm barely using it. And he's like, got agents running, right? And it's like, okay, those are not the same. And so I think that is a pretty hard thing to understand. So to me, I love that you guys built and are kind of encompassing this Gen AI concept. Let's talk a little bit more about that so we can kind of help understand how it fits into everything else that you're doing. So it started as something for students. I've heard it's now available outside of students. I imagine, just based on the 90-day every year story you told earlier from your CIO, that it's changing a lot. It's not just like let's go make a video and push play and let it run for the next 5 years, right? Stuff is changing every day. And so talk to me about kind of the evolution of that Gen AI 101 and where it is today, where it's heading. What do I need to know?
Yeah, so the Gen AI 101 course that we did, that's available for anyone in the public to take at kelly.com/learn AI. And one surprising thing that we found is that even though it was made for students and it's very IU, there's some good IU jokes in there, right? Some good IU football celebrations in there. Maybe a Purdue joke or two when we're talking about things. So even though we have that, it's actually being used by like a bunch of companies to upskill in AI, including some very large ones, multiple Fortune 500 companies. And I think the reason is because it's so practical, and it's also relatively objective, like being not from a tech company, right? So I think it's received better.
That's a big one. That's because I know a lot of folks that have. People ask me all the time, where do I go to learn the next steps, or what do I do? And Google has a great program, but it's very Google focused, right? And so I guess yours is probably more IU focused than Purdue focused, but I'm not here to learn about IU. I'm here to learn about AI. And so it can probably take a more pragmatic look at the tools across the board that aren't so software focused.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And then just having a practical takeaway every 6 minutes, right? In terms of the development for the curriculum at IU, we're doing something really unique. The courses I'm teaching, those 101 and 201 courses that all the Kelly freshmen will be required to take, those are going to be revamped every single year really extensively. And so for context, I'm sure listeners know, but like most academic courses, like I taught accounting before this. My research is actually at the intersection of machine learning and accounting. And like those courses are updated, once every few years. If you're thinking about things like the fundamentals of financial accounting don't change very much, right? But this changes a lot. And so it's going to be revamped every semester. And then in addition to that, we're also adding like something we call like a what's new in AI segments. So like we have built-in courses or built-in classes where that whole class is just dedicated to like what happened in AI this week, right? Or these last 2 weeks, like what's new that you need to know. And in our pilot run of 201 in the spring, that allowed me to like spend a whole class on Claude, right? Because Claude is becoming really popular in the business world. It was like, well, you need to know Claude, you know what a skills file is. Turns out it's just a detailed prompt, like maybe you shouldn't make the stock market drop by 8% and when they release one. Maybe it should, I don't know, but at least now you can know what it is. But that flexibility isn't typically there. And so we're building that in intentionally, knowing it moves so fast, knowing we want to really help students stay up to date. Just having that built-in thing of like, we don't know what this is going to cover, but we know there's going to be something. Right. And that's been really, really, really cool. And I feel blessed to be able to do that.
Well, as I'm listening to you both talk about rolling this out to what feels like a zillion people, right? 120 plus thousand humans. One of the things that I kind of extrapolate from that as a lesson that I've picked up from other leaders in smaller organizations is, AI champions. And you both are that, right? You both are driving that boat. And then what I have seen success in is cross-departmental AI champions. So a person in a department that's like the lead that's really into it, maybe in the accounting department and the sales department and whatever. And then they're getting together as like a small group of people that are pushing the boundaries in their own worlds and learning off of each other and growing. And it sounds like some of that is happening kind of organically through your efforts, because I've heard you mention people in other departments that, quote unquote, get it or are part of the conversation. But then the other thing that I see a lot of success with for companies is a single department that really just like leads. And it feels like maybe, Brian, with your push in the Miller College or what's the Kelly School of Business? Sorry,
Yes.
I went to Ball State. It was called Miller College.
No worries.
The Kelly School of Business. So you're driving the boat there and you're getting it adopted at the freshman level. Right. And so I imagine that when that plays out and you guys see the success that comes from it, that becomes a model that other departments can replicate in some ways. And start to build into those places too. And so, we're all moving at different speeds, but I think that's really important to understand as a leadership team that there has to be leadership at the top that gets it and pushes it. And then you have to really empower departments and individual leaders, champions, to grab the bull and go, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like it sounds like you're seeing a lot of what we're seeing. And just to affirm, like, I think having both those is really important. Having the ability to stay nimble, right? And sometimes when a team is smaller, you can stay nimble, and that can be really, really helpful. Like it was really wonderful for me in creating Gen AI 101 to be able to talk with Anne every day and be like, Anne, like I'm seeing this. And she would say, that's a great way to explain it for a 38-year-old who loves college sports. But, a 19-year-old who might like something different might really not get that metaphor. And it was really great to have that small team you trust, right, to be able to work things through.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly the way to think about it. So I like to ask this question of my guest as kind of a final question. As you think about, we're dealing with like existential challenges, right, for humanity in some ways. Like there's a small subset of people that believe that the robots are going to kill us all, right, someday. Hope that's not the case, but we'll see. But we're all dealing with things that are stressful to think about, maybe not tactical same day type stuff, but like as we look into the future, some of which is power, water, earth resources, etc. Is there anything that's keeping you up at night? Anything that you're like thinking about into the future and like, man, this is a major issue? I'm going to tell you mine real quick because it touches on something I think Ann said earlier, or you said earlier, Brian. Students in Indiana are coming from different backgrounds, right? I mean, I know people that barely have high-speed internet at their schools because they're in rural Indiana and don't have that capability. And then I have other schools that are like building with AI. And when you look at that, it's like an unfair playground. And so I love the fact that you're level setting at the freshman level and kind of getting everybody up to speed quickly. I think that's a really strong approach. But that's something that's concerned me for a while. I talked to Katie Jenner, the Secretary of Education, about this because, man, we could really create a haves and have-nots culture unintentionally, right? By leaning into the speed of which the world moves versus getting hit by the train is the analogy I keep using. So anything that you can think of individually that like triggers that thought?
I want to actually double down on what you said, Jayson, because I think in addition to that, what is also happening is there are some schools that are, for all intents and purposes, banning most or all AI use.
They're scared of it. And they don't know what to do with it.
Yes, but then what's happening is, again, students are going and using that at home, and there may or may not be structured guidance on that, right? Like my kiddos use my accounts on everything for like their iPad and everything else. And so creepily, I, check that or look at that. Right. And so I noticed that one of my daughters was using it to get answers for like a book that she was supposed to be summarizing. And she said, well, I did read the book and I just wanted to know, like, what are some ways for me to kind of talk about it? Or because I couldn't think about like what this theme was. And I said, well, there are different ways to ask that question, right? Where you're not cheating, but you can use AI for an assistant. So I think there needs to be some more guidance in there. And I think oftentimes it's because our educators, right? Like they haven't been trained on all the things around AI, and it's really challenging to teach on a particular subject area where you don't know exactly how it's working or why it might be hallucinating. But teachers are the best. There's no one better than teachers at facilitating those conversations. And in my mind, elementary school teachers are hands down the best at engaging in crazy questions and saying, well, let's think about that and let's ask the AI, right? And so that's the other great part. You have a tool, you don't know how to use it. Ask the tool, right? The tool is going to tell you what to do and how to do it. As long as you approach it with a little bit more criticality, like being like, is this really real? Like, is this critical? Like, you are questioning the person. So there are really great ways for us to approach this. And if we aren't utilizing it in K-12 schools, my worry is that when they do get to college, they don't, there are not the guardrails that you have like in K-12. In K-12, you have the person with you in class all day long. You can see what they know and what they don't know. College classes, we don't get that. We don't get that opportunity. We get them for a few hours during the week to see and assess what they're doing. But that is why, in my mind, that assessment and really figuring out what the person knows and what the person is able to do, it becomes a much more human question of, like, what do you really know? What can I help you with? I want to make you better. I want to make you improved. And if it's all AI and it's none of you, why am I paying you? Why am I not paying the AI? So
that's a great point. And I love that you talked about your personal anecdote with your daughter. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and they figure stuff out. I'm a tech guy. Like, I have our network at home locked down, right? You can't do a thing on it. It's all set up so that you only get to watch what I want you to watch on the times I want you to do it. And the other day, we found out that my wife's car has internet built into it. And she had figured out that she could connect to my wife's Wi-Fi that's sitting in our garage and break all of my filters. I'm like, what is happening right now?
I love that. My kids were showing me how they know again, my girls they're about to be 12. And they were showing me this year how you can spam the VPN in order to get past any filters at school. Like the fact that the term spamming the VPN and knowing exactly what to do in order to get around filters in 6th grade, like there's no winning. For K-12 schools, there's no winning here. Like you can't, it comes down to this notion too of abstinence, right? Like just saying that, like that doesn't work. We all know that the education pieces have to be there about the why, right? Once kids understand the why, they can make better choices, or at least we hope they can.
That's a great point. Brian, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I think similar to you, just I'm most worried about inequality in terms of the opportunity of people just knowing what these things are capable of and knowing how to get the most out of them. I think it's the Wild West right now. Like we were saying earlier, like there's not a huge consensus on what AI can do. It's changing all the time. Someone could have made a great faith effort and been totally caught up a year ago. And now if they're not caught up on like Claude local agents or Agentic or something, like they're behind. And it's hard to keep up. Like I think it's impossible to keep up, but that I worry about that gap of opportunity just growing and growing through no fault of anyone's own. But that's something that I'm most worried about and most excited to help try to address, right? Whatever people want to do with the skills, however they want to use AI or choose not to do it, that's great. I just want them to be aware of what it can do and also like aware of some of the downsides it can do, right? Like deepfakes are really good. They're really easy to create. It's good to be aware of that. And so just having that knowledge, I think can really help people.
All right. 2 things to put you on the spot. One, everyone listening to this is obviously interested in AI or they wouldn't be listening. And so repeat your URL again for those that aren't IU members so they can understand how to get into the Gen AI 101 stuff that you guys are working on. Let's start there. Yes. And then I have a follow-up question. Sure.
That URL, and thanks for this, it's kelly.com/learnai.
That's easy. kelly.com/learnai. Perfect.
Oh, I'm sorry. I messed it up. It's kelly.iu.edu/learnai.
Let's try that again.
Sorry about that. That's harder. kelly.iu.edu/learnai.
And Kelly has an E or no?
It has an E. Yeah.
KELLEY.iu.edu/learnai. All right. We got there. The second thing I'm going to ask you about is, and this is the final question because I really appreciate you guys spending time with me, but one of the questions I get a lot is, there's so much noise out there. And a lot of that noise is driven by the PR firms at OpenAI and, Elon Musk, right? And so what can I trust? What do I believe? What do I need to care about? One of the things I try to do on this show is a news segment at the front end of every show, which is like, these are the 3 things I noticed this week that I think you all need to pay attention to. I heard you mention in your 201 classes, you're going to do some version of that, like AI news related stuff. Are there other resources coming out of you or coming out of IU or any other places we could point people to that are looking to just like separate the wheat from the chaff and understand like this is the stuff I should care about? And if not, that's fine. I'm a little surprised that there isn't more opportunity out there because everything's so biased and everything's so driven by the tech companies and what's out there. And it's moving so fast, right? But it doesn't feel like there's, for the everyday average person, if I'm sitting at a desk and I just want to like not get left behind, I'm having a hard time finding resources to send to people too. So if you even come up with stuff after this, pull your folks and send it to me. I'd love to be able to share that stuff with our listener base because that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, I've had, honestly, Anne may have some good answers. I've had a really hard time. I've found that most places seem to be selling something or seem to, in my opinion, be vastly overstating the capabilities of models. And this is coming from someone who thinks AI could really help, right? And so I've had a real hard time finding that.
Okay.
Yeah. I would agree with that too. I think there are, so Justin Hodgson, he does an educational podcast that talks from the educational side of things. That's good. I can figure out that name and send that to you. That's helpful. Yeah, that they go over again within an educational context, what that might look like. We have things that are happening at IU. We have on ai.iu.edu. So you can kind of see how we've been approaching things, our university-wide process, how we're using AI in research and teaching, all of the different highlights around that. So that's been our one source of truth, at least around IU and what's going on. And then, because we also have it in our UITS AI page that, again, shows what kind of data you can put into what kind of systems. But that's all guidance at the university level.
Got it. And that's important to disseminate to your large audience of people. But as you guys expand into the broader public, right, and you're offering this Gen AI course to John Q. Public, just working at a cubicle, any resources you can share now or in the future, forward them over, please, because this is the kind of stuff that my audience is constantly listening for. They're just wanting to not get left behind. Not everyone that's listening is building and is on the tip of the spear here in this stuff, right? But I think we're all a little worried.
Honestly, Jayson, I think one of the things I've been thinking about building for myself is some kind of an agent or even just a prompt that runs every day that can go out, find the newest news sources and filter it the way that I want. I've used it a lot for Google Notebook LM. That's one of my favorite tools. So I'll dump a bunch of articles that I'll get from Gartner, from other places, and then say, I want you to create a podcast for someone who's an AVP in learning technologies that has an expertise in education that loves examples. I love a ton of rich examples, and then throw in a couple of puns because I love a good pun, so that it disseminates all of that and at least gives me something, because I'm driving back and forth to Indianapolis quite a bit to iterate on. So that might be something that people build themselves, even pulling from the news sources that they think are important, building a particular lens that's going to help it disseminate it for them, depending on their skills.
I love that. And that's a relatively low barrier to entry to learn how to use Notebook LM, to just dump URLs in and then have it, you literally click a button and it generates a podcast for you that you can listen to on a drive. That's perfect. That's a great use case, Ann. Well, Ann, Brian, thank you both so much for joining the podcast here. I am grateful for all the work you're doing. I think it's super important for the next generation of students and for higher education to be moving in the direction you guys are helping push it. And so it's going to be a fun journey. The next 10 years could be the most interesting 10 years in all of human existence, quite literally. And so what a fun time to be alive. I'm an AI optimist. I know there's a lot of people out there that are like scared to death of what's coming, but I couldn't be more excited. And I love that you guys are leaning in the same way and really impacting a bunch of young people. And so thank you so much for joining. I'm sure I'll see you around at some other events and stuff, but please do forward me any cool new information that you have, any rollouts that you have. I'll make sure that our audience hears about it.
Thanks, Jayson.
Cheers. Thanks again to Ann and Brian at IU and to the broader IU community for driving this conversation. I know President Whitten has leaned in from the top and said AI is going to be an important thing. And so it's really encouraging to see a university move quickly and try to level up their staff, their admins, their teachers, their professors, and the students, so that the students coming out with a college degree from IU are equipped for the world. I think that's a big deal. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that in addition to the work that's happening at IU, other universities across the state of Indiana and probably across the country and globe are leaning in here. One of our show sponsors, IWU, Indiana Wesleyan, has really grabbed the bull by the horns on this topic. They are absolutely pushing the boundaries and trying to make sure that every student that goes to that university comes out equipped, because business leaders that I talk to today are expecting you to walk into your job with your Iron Man suit. And so it's just really encouraging to see higher ed moving faster than I've ever seen it happen. I think that the conversations are happening, they're adapting, and they're realizing that, we have to be prepared. Our job as a higher education university is to equip the people that come out of our institution to go change the world, to go be stars in their workplace. And so that's what we're seeing. It's really encouraging. And thank you again to Ann and Brian for the great conversation. Thanks also to IWU for continuing to endorse and support this show. And to the other higher education leaders out there that are pushing the boundaries. I know I talked to Dr. Jenner, Secretary of Education here in the state, and I've talked to members at board of directors from most of the universities in the state. Like, these are the conversations that need to be happening. This is the stuff that needs to happen. So please, please, please continue to push the ball down the field, and let's equip our students like these universities are doing. Next week, guys, I will be sitting down with the leaders from Innovate Map. They are a product design company. And I'm super excited to hear their worldview and perspective on how AI is impacting the product design space. So should be a great chat. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for listening. Cheers.